Hello and welcome back to another session of 3PL Live Sessions. I'm Cameron Robertson, CEO at 3PL Systems. I also have Michael Sternberg, our Director of Sales and co-host with us. And then we also have a very special guest with us today, Chandra from Microsoft. Chandra, do you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chandra Subramania. I'm a senior cloud architect at Microsoft. I basically help my customers achieve their business goals in terms of their cloud journey. And also, I have about 25 years of experience in the enterprise applications. So I also work for my customers like consultant to help achieve their business goals.
Very cool. Well, again, Chandra, thanks for joining us. You're a perfect guest for today's topic, which is, utilizing AI and ML in the supply chain sector. As a way of kind of getting started for us, do you mind maybe giving us some baseline definitions around what AI is and what ML is so we can start there?
Absolutely. I was wondering if I can share a slide deck,
Sure.
so that we can go through like a guided session.
Sure.
So please let me know if we can see it.
Yep, we're good to go.
Awesome. So yeah, that's a beautiful question, and I do want to say that it's not new. It's not a new question. It's not the first time I've heard it, because I think it's AI now, but if we look at all the trend-setting technologies, before, like for example, during the e-commerce, era, or now it's the AI ML era. I think the first thing is setting a stage to make the audience or the people understand what it is, right? How can they implement in their businesses or even in their personal lives, right? And how does that actually help achieve their goals, right? Um, so if I want to really give a broad definition about AI ML, um, AI is more like, it's, I want to say it's like a software, right? That basically mimics human thinking to perform tasks, right? I don't want to say complex all the time, because, like for example, my daughter cheats on me using the Chat GPT to do her homework, right? So it's not like it only does complex tasks, but the beauty of AI is it kind of mimics a human brain, right? So you can talk about providing like simple calculations to maybe if you want to write something, right? If you want to write a diary or an experience, or if you want to ask questions about how things will look like, or certain knowledge on in a certain field, right? All that can be nicely indexed by the AI and give you like logical answers based on what you ask. So that's basically AI, but AI is a very, very broad stream. And when I talk about machine learning, it's I would say a subset of AI, right? It's kind of a part of the artificial intelligence, where you're feeding information constantly, right, to again a software or an algorithm, and it learns. The machine basically learns based on the data that you feed, and then it basically creates models. So just to give you an example, a good thing about machine learning would be, let's say, demand forecasting, right? That's the most complex thing in the supply chain industry right now, where like I said, I worked like almost 20 years in the manufacturing high tech industries, and one of the most complex things that I have all the time heard from my clients is, how do I get my forecast to a logical accuracy, right? And machine learning is basically that, well, one of the things that machine learning can do, you feed data from various sources, you teach the machine as to how to look at it and what to get out of it, and then it gives you an output that you are expecting. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, and I appreciate defining the terms for somebody like myself in particular. I'm not a software engineer. I'm not a database guy, and so being able to kind of dilute down these concepts into a way that I can understand is appreciated. I do have a question, and out of curiosity,
Sure.
Obviously, the quality of your data and the amount of data that you're feeding into these algorithms matters. Is there any sort of, and I'm sure it's different depending on the application, but is there any sort of like rule for we need X amount of data for this to even be something that we can rely on or something that's worthwhile?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Absolutely. So it again depends on the scale, right, at which you want to operate. So the amount of data is completely or directly proportional to the individual customer needs, right? So, like for example, let's say there's a small sized private firm, right, who basically, let's say, provide accounting help to their customers, just as an example, right? And let's say they want to develop a model where they want to see like the time spent with the customers on this accounting assistance, right? How is that directly proportional to the increase in their client base, right? Just as a little use case.
Sure.
So in that case, we're not looking like a ton of data, right, to feed the machine learning algorithm, because at that point we are only just doing a trending, right? But something very complex like demand forecasting, right? Demand forecasting or really creating a meaningful forecast is not just about one set of data or one source. It is basically multiple sources, right? Like, for example, a forecast is affected by the changing political environment, right? Economic environment, social environment, and the mood, right, of the customers in general, right? And also the environmental factors. So because this is complex, right? The more data you feed, you get a better or accuracy in what you're trying to do in terms of creating a meaningful forecast. Is that making sense, or
It makes perfect
Makes
sense.
The
Awesome.
more complex the problem, the more data you typically need for it to solve for it. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Before we move on from here, I kind of like an off-subject question. Most problems in today's world, in the business world, can be solved with RPA, robotic processing automation. Do you foresee AI machine learning overtaking RPA, or do you still think that a majority of things can be solved by RPA? Because one of the things I see quite often is that people are advertising that they have AI ML models inside of their systems, but in reality, all it is RPA. And that's because of the fact that you really don't need AI and ML to solve a lot of problems. So I guess my question to you from Microsoft's point of view, do you foresee RPA still being utilized quite heavily in place of AI ML, or do you see AI ML ultimately kind of just taking it all over?
Well, that's a fantastic question. And I don't want to be careful when I'm answering this, because this is not the first time I got this. So RPA, like for example, I have worked as a consultant, right, implementing RPA at several clients before my role at Microsoft. So RPA is, well, the traditional RPA, right, is more about how do you achieve or accomplish performing repeatable tasks, right? Let's say I want to give an example. The accounts payable, right, processing invoices for its customers, right? So there's a very set path there, right? There are very defined steps which are repeatable, right? There's nothing new in terms of how you process an invoice, right? So the RPA is basically very, very helpful in that case, where you just feed the steps, right, in terms of a recording. It learns and it performs those repeatable steps without a human intervention. The ability that probably RPA is challenged with is the thinking part of it. Like for example, we talked about AI definition, right, in the previous conversation. So the RPA, unfortunately, right, like the traditional RPA, it doesn't have the capability to think, right? It just performs repeatable tasks to the extent you feed it with. Whereas now I want to switch a little bit in terms of what's happening now in terms of in AI world, right? So RPA can also be done with AI induced into it, right? Now what we're doing is, in addition to having the RPA perform repeatable tasks, right? Just as an example, let's say in a warehouse operations, right? How do I think that one of the biggest challenge I've been always hearing is, okay, how do I prevent multiple trips in the warehouse by the pickers, right? Now, two things can happen here. One is you can implement RPA, right? But also you need a little bit of thinking enabled there, because when you're talking about multiple trips in a warehouse, you also are talking about trying to plan the space within the warehouse, right? So now you have to feed it with data just so that it can come with maps that will avoid multiple trips, right, in a warehouse for pickers. So now what is happening is our RPA is now clubbing with AI, right, to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish there. So I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but like I said,
great answer.
And yeah.
No, that's awesome. So, Chandra, you mentioned you've got decades of experience doing this for manufacturers and on the technical side as well. Can you share with us some use cases based on your experience to give this a little bit more context for the people that are listening?
Absolutely. I think that was my next thing. Thanks for the segue into it.
Yeah.
So basically, some of the use cases that as a consultant, right, for a long time, and an enterprise architect in the enterprise world, and also a cloud architect, right? Some of the very interesting challenges, right, I have seen with the customers, and they really invest heavily in terms of time, in terms of resources, right, in terms of also, let's say, their financial commitment, right? So some of the things like, and these are the four my favorite, that I have looked at or consulted with my customers for. So like, the demand forecasting, right? Big deal. And I'll explain a little bit, what kind of projects I've done and how AI can really help there. But also inventory management, right? One of the biggest things about inventory is, it's a big way of actually protecting your bottom line, right? Also saving your costs. And the third thing is, warehouse automation, right? And finally, the route optimization. Route optimization, you are aware, right? You are in the 3PL space, is really a very complex scenario, right? But if done correctly with the right tools, it actually provides beautiful optimization, right? In terms of efficiencies, in terms of saving time, in terms of being able to meet the DOT regulations, right? And improving customer satisfaction. So these are some of the use cases that I have personally dealt with, and I'll dive a little bit deeper in each of these, right? But do stop me if you have any questions or if you need clarity about something.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, awesome. I do want to, again, I'm not trying to, it is not a sales pitch, but I do want to bring in Azure, Microsoft into this picture, right? Because when I consulted with my customers, it was mostly SAP or cloud, right? And then Microsoft Azure has been my go-to, right, for to basically recommend solutions to the customers. So when we talk about demand forecast, right, one of the things is, how do we make sure that we actually are looking at, like I mentioned in my previous conversation, right, um, different sources of data, right, or different factors that will impact the forecast. So, like for example, one of the things that does impact, or let's say four things that impact demand forecast, right, accuracy, is economic, social, political, and the environmental factors, right? So one of the things we were able to achieve, in terms of creating a meaningful forecast is kind of, combining SAP and Microsoft, right, together, right? Where SAP, from an ERP perspective, right, is a model where it generates like, tons of data, right? And Azure becomes the house for that data. So when the transactions are made, all the transaction models are fed into Azure, right? Your historical data is fed into the Azure, but also at the same time, like I talked about political, economic, and environmental, right? So that data, you can scrape, let's say, different, public sites or public domains to get that external information. Now, what Azure does is it clubs all of this data, right? You can put it in storage, you can create pipelines for that. And then when you install machine learning, in terms of R or Python or any other, tool we have, it basically creates a beautiful forecast, taking every single thing into consideration, right? Like all the factors that we talked about. And I have seen, I've personally delivered, accurate or near accurate forecasts for a lot of my customers, and who've been very satisfied about that forecast or that project. Right.
That makes one of the questions I have in regards to forecasting. We have tools like ChatGPT now that you're able to pull a lot of this data from. So rather than utilizing screen scraping, with these AI ML models that are being built for forecasting, would you be able to utilize kind of integration with ChatGPT to pull this outside data, such as the political data, the environmental data, or even, especially in logistics, you deal with issues like weather, and being able to pull that data into models to help forecast, hey, are we going to have issues with late deliveries and things like that? Do you see these tools working hand in hand going into the future?
Yeah, you stumped me there, Cameron. Well, I was talking about my experience, but you're absolutely right. I think that the data scrapping was probably one of the old strategies, right? When I was probably consulting, and things like ChatGPT were not in the fray at that time. But your point is absolutely correct. We can actually build intelligent models, right? Using prompt engineering, LLM, etc., to basically create the like you said, the environment where we can pull the data through the AI, right? Through like a GPT model, and that very well fits into this scenario where we don't have to go that traditional route of scraping data manually through sources. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. Any other questions, or I can start jumping into a couple of other scenarios?
Yeah,
Go ahead
let's
and
keep going.
onto some of those ones.
Awesome. All right. So one of my favorites, route optimization, right? So I've worked with, like I said, manufacturing companies who are in the retail space. We have had customers, like biggest customers like Lowe's, Home Depot, and others, right? One of the things I've always been presented with is how do I create efficiencies, right? In the entire transportation space, right? Like for example, first thing is, you have DOT regulations you have to meet. Second thing is, how do you increase the efficiency, of the distribution, right, through the transportation model. Also making sure that I am not spending, um, or my cost is not more than, which impacts the bottom line, right? So some of the things that I've been asked, like for example, how do I make sure there's no backtracking, right? How do I make sure that my driver, I can track the vehicle, right? And I can understand if there are any like roadblocks in terms of where the driver is headed, right? How's the environment going to impact the entire journey, right? From, let's say, source to the customer's destination. Um, and then how can I actually get real-time updates, right? So that I can basically connect that to my customer, right? And make sure that they know from a just-in-time perspective when the product is going to reach them, right? So all of these, using again machine learning and AI, one of the things is, I have used, and it's extremely useful, is the Azure Maps, right? It has built-in, AI and ML capability. It also has built-in APIs, like for example, waypoint optimization, distance matrix. I'm not going to drain this slide, but these are snap to roll, right? These are some of the capabilities where customer or the company, the carrier company, right, or the manufacturing company can really look at creating efficient routes, calculating the travel time, and also basically aligning the GPS points, right, to the nearest road segment. Network performance is something that can hugely be improved using Azure Maps and the built-in machine learning model within it. And that's that I have seen, like I said, I have implemented this with a lot of my customers, and they're extremely happy with their experience on this.
So
I have a question in regards to Azure Maps. So oh,
go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about Azure Maps specifically. So does Azure Maps take into consideration trucking routes? And what I mean by that is a lot of semis cannot go down certain roads. Is Azure Maps taking that into consideration, or is that something that AIML is going to be looking at the local laws, things like that, in order to figure that out?
That's a very good question. So first thing is that it does take into consideration, right? The like I said, it has alignment with the GPS points, right? So it does know, like, which if there are blockages, etc. But at the same time, we have an API which can actually look at all the DOT regulations, right? And the regulations are fed right into the ML model, just so that it creates an optimized route. So that, connected with the GPS, like the snap to roll, right? It basically, you can write an algorithm to avoid, right, any route that you probably see blockages, or which probably will add to the time of travel. And the Azure Maps will beautifully lay out a route that is completely optimized using these capabilities.
Makes sense.
Very cool. So I've got a couple comments. Number one, it's really interesting to see and hear about everything that's going on the back end and how that ties to the customer facing side, because the end consumer, they just see like a delivery update and lifetime tracking, and you don't really understand how complex what is going on in the background is, and the data sets that are feeding it and the models that are coming up with these routes. So that's the first point. Really cool to kind of see that, because I think most people don't even consider how this happens. It doesn't happen magically. Number two, So a lot of what you're talking about is, live time routing and maybe adjusting if there's, a closure or weather delay or whatever. I'm wondering, with the previous implementations of this route optimization and Azure Maps, are you guys also looking at historical routes and maybe seeing like, hey, last year, based on everything we did, is there something we could have done better? So are you not just doing live time, like you said, but are you also learning from previous data and how that could be optimized?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Historical data is definitely part of the AI ML model and it's embedded in the maps, right? And I can give you an example. Let's say historical models, where we see inefficiencies, right? One of my favorite things was like backtracking. So customer absolutely wanted to avoid backtracking, right? Where to get to a destination, you're repeating a certain a certain route, right? Like for example, going on the same road 2 times, right, or more. So the historical data, like you said, it basically provides insights into that kind of granularity, where to say, okay, you could have avoided backtracking if you actually took this route instead of a Y route, right? So that historical data definitely is one of the very, very critical inputs to the Azure Maps and the machine learning model.
Very cool. Thanks for that.
Makes sense.
If there are no questions, I can go to the next use case.
Yeah, let's move on.
Awesome. All right, this is another thing, and I talked about and that you had a good question, Cameron, about RPA, right? So one of the things again AI and ML can really help with is optimizing the warehouse operations, right? Like I said, one of the things that again was presented to me as a challenge is how do I avoid multiple trips, right, for a picker to pick the same product. So let me put this into perspective, like create a scenario, right, hypothetical. So let's say I have in a day, let's say I have 1,800 orders, right? Now, if I sell a certain product, let's say paint, and out of 1,800 orders, let's say 900 orders have a line item which is the same product of a certain quantity, right? Now, if you went by the traditional way of picking, where at least most of my customers what I've seen is you go order by order, right? So order 1, item 1, order 2, item 2. Now, if order 1, item 2, and order 1, item 1, and order 2, item 2 are the same, I'm making 2 trips to pick the same product from the same shelf, right? Now, how do I make sure I avoid that? Because that actually adds to a lot of time in terms of picking. And if I'm able to somehow figure out an efficient way of avoiding that, it will basically improve my time to delivery, number 1, right? Number 2, it also improves or reduces the amount of time that the picker is spending on the orders, right? And he can actually pick more orders within the same amount of time or within a shift. So here, in this particular scenario, we have implemented both RPA and machine learning, right? So what we've done is, like for example, how do we consolidate, right, all these similar or same items that need to be picked for multiple orders, put them in a place, and then be able to segregate after the fact, at the time of loading, right? And in this case, we were able to, combine RPA, IoT, like we had sensors, right, in the shelves, etc., and machine learning to basically, create a work plan for the picker where he's only going 1 time to pick the same product, even if it is 100 orders. And that was a huge, success for me and for my clients. And I can really brag about that. So this is one of the use cases we can talk about. we can really ponder on, right? And then also the other thing is like, how can we use computer vision, right, in terms of being able to scan the barcodes. So instead of like, this is another thing where there's a huge time saver, right? Instead of the picker, when he picks or when he goes to pick, scanning every single time he's trying to pick the product, right? How do we use computer vision to automatically scan, right, while he's going and picking the product itself, just so that he can avoid that manual operation. And that has been a huge success. And also, like, it avoided a lot of like human errors. And I want to see if you can visualize this, right? So I'm a picker. I go to a warehouse and like 10 products or 10 boxes of something, and I have to scan that multiple times, right? What if I scan, like if it's 10, I only scan 9 times? What if I scan 8 times, right? And then I come back and figure out that, oh gosh, I've missed like 2 products. And that could be a customer impact, that would be an impact to yourself too, in terms of cost, etc., or creating an opportunity for returns, right? But with computer vision, the human doesn't have to do anything. It knows on an order how many items are, and then it automatically scans using the computer vision capability.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. One of the craziest videos I've ever seen was within a warehouse where it's fully automated, where they're utilizing robots, utilizing AI ML with robots to actually pick. And it's actually Amazon's warehouse. When you see those at work, it's mind-boggling how complex those systems are, but how well they work. Seamlessly being able to pick shipments a moment, or pick orders the moment it's placed on their website. These robots go out, pick the product, pack it, and it's already getting onto a truck. But it's incredible, the efficiency, just based on what you explained and what you shared from your experience, that you can see just by looking at these technologies. One of the questions I do have in general, and I think I know the answer to this question, but AI and ML has historically been very expensive to deploy. Is that still the case, or do you view that differently?
That's a fantastic question. I think Microsoft is going the direction of really commercializing AI and ML, right? You're right that these were really like tools for some of those big organizations, or who could really afford, right, to put money there. But I think one of the things that our leadership, I've heard from our leadership, is how are we trying to commercialize this, right? So that every single organization can utilize it in their own business without having to do a ton of investment. So and that you'll see like with the drive that we have for co-pilots, right? So we launched, or we're launching co-pilots in every single space. Like we have now co-pilots for M365. We have co-pilots for Teams. We have co-pilot for Azure, right? And even the GPT models, we are commercializing it so that every single organization, irrespective of their size, they can actually utilize without a ton of investment.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's one of those things. If you own a company or you're within a company and you're not starting to look at these technologies, that's a scary thought.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions on this topic, on this scenario?
I don't think so.
Awesome. So moving on to the next one, probably the final one. So inventory management, right? And this is viewed as one of the biggest impactor of the bottom line, right? Now, with the ML and AI, we basically create algorithms to look at the movement of the goods and try to basically attach it to the demand, right? So what that means is, like for example, fast moving versus slow moving, right? Looking at or reading the shelf life and making sure that the customer's requirement of whatever shelf life he wants on the products is met, right? How do we deal with like overstock issues, etc.? So the machine learning, creating these algorithms in the inventory management space, it really help in terms of when and how the products are replenished, right? And also introduce that concept of just in time. So what that means is instead of stocking the product with, in a warehouse, which will basically a cost of storing it, cost of maintaining the warehouse, right? Cost of making sure the goods are not damaged, or goods won't get impacted by the weather, etc. Right? All of this cost, right? If you're able to reduce and really invest that money into your customers, let's say satisfaction area, or even give that price benefit to the customer, right? It's a tremendous win for any company, right? So from Microsoft, has helped, and we are helping. And by the way, just one thing, I'm actually a leader, or I'm leading an industry motion within Microsoft, where we're helping ISVs like yourself. So ISVs are independent software vendors, where we're helping them grow, right, with multiple funding initiatives. So again, coming back to the topic of inventory management, we induce these machine learning and AI capabilities, right, to predict demand and then distribute the products most efficiently. One example I wanted to give again from my previous project is, so we had the scenario, right, where in a particular area, let's say West Coast, right? We have to distribute the products to all the stores, individual stores. Now, what was happening earlier to this project being realized was that we were just looking at, okay, what is being requested by the customer, right? And then blindly filling them. But think about it, when we have actually a high demand for a certain product, and we are not able to meet, let's say, the customer's demand, right? And we have used ML within that space to basically say, okay, how can we do the distribution in terms of back ordering situation, right, to the customers based on their revenue in a year. So let's say store 1 does 10 million in a year versus store 5, which only does 1 million. If they put an order, right, for the same amount of product, which is basically in high demand, how do I make sure I kind of prorate, right? To make sure that 10 million actually gets more product than the 1 million. So we use machine learning here to basically, create that model where we are able to meet the demand of the customer efficiently without having huge back orders, right? So
I have a question, and this just keeps popping in my head as you're going through this inventory management example. So during COVID, right, we had a huge problem with toilet paper, right? It affected everybody, and it was all over the news, and no one could get toilet paper, right? I'm curious, and this may be an unfair question, the first part. I'm curious if ML could have done anything to prevent that, and if not, how can it help prevent it in the future?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, probably you and I can get into like a proof of concept, Michael, and there definitely know we can help avoid those situations, but
right.
I don't want to give like an instant answer, right? Which
sure
may or may not be, sounding right. But yeah, definitely there could be, solutions using AI and ML to avoid those kind of situations. But that's a tough question. Yeah, you stumped me there.
Well, an incredibly out of the ordinary situation, an extreme outlier of a situation, extremely unpredictable situation with the global pandemic and how it affected the supply chain, specifically around toilet paper. So I think expecting ML to be able to solve it perfectly is definitely unfair. I'm just curious with kind of where the limits are. I think again, a kind of a perfect storm, global pandemic, people stuck at home needing toilet paper. I don't know how you predict that, but I only have a human mind, so I don't know if these tools, these machines can do better than I can, right?
Yeah,
Mike with the curveball.
No, that's actually, like I said, that's a fantastic question. If you were my client and I was still consulting, I would take up that as a challenge and a project.
Yeah. Yeah, take it as a compliment. You got me thinking in the potential, and I was like, oh, I wonder what would happen there. It's just kind of interesting. So, thank you for that. It was a curveball, like Cameron said. So, I apologize, but thank you.
No. Yeah, like I said, tough questions are always welcome as long as I'm not expected to provide an instant answer.
100%. Wanted your thoughts more than anything, not a concrete answer.
Right. All right. So I think this is really important, right? Now jumping on, so we discussed all these scenarios, use cases. I explained my experience, but I think one question I always get, and I think I think Cameron, you were kind of touching on it, originally, right? How do organizations, make sure that they are AI ready, right? Because it's not like something available in the market like an apple or an orange. You just buy it and start implementing, right? You have to know, why do you need AI, right? What are the problems you're trying to solve? Are there challenges you're not able to solve with, let's say, with not having AI, right? And how ready is your organization, in terms of strategy and vision, right? That's really like yourself, Cameron, at the CEO level, right? Thinking about, okay, what my vision is for the company, and then where does AI basically fit, right, in the strategy or in the vision? And then do I have the data and infrastructure, right? If not, how do I make sure that I work on, creating that model where I have enough data and infrastructure to support an AI model, right? And then basically the skills and talent, right? Do I have the right people, who can work with this, or do I have to source them? And the most important thing, again, two things in my mind are ethics and responsibility, and process and governance, right? They're big, because without ethics, without responsibility, the AI can really cause a lot of harm, right? So how do I make sure that I create a framework for the ethics and responsibility and governance, right? And have a policy framework and processes, making sure they adhere to this framework, right? And finally, partnerships and collaboration. Microsoft is always here to partner with you, but also you need to think about your scale, right? How do I choose the right partner to get my vision realized?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I said it earlier, and I'm a true believer in this. If your organization is not looking at AI technologies and how you can deploy them within within 5 to 10 years, I do feel like those organizations are going to go away, because the ones that are taking advantage of AI and ML are going to accelerate at a rate that you can't keep up with without these technologies being deployed, and relying on companies like Microsoft to help support those needs. The bottom line is companies like Microsoft are making the investments needed in order to accelerate growth around AI and ML. Although you can create small models for a cheap cost, creating large, complex models can be very costly. And that's why it's so important to work in your bottom point there, work in collaboration with these partners like Microsoft and others that can assist in this journey. It's incredible, all these different things that you broke down for us today.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that real quick, Cameron, because again, going back to me not being a software engineer or a database engineer, and not being the most technical of individuals, what I'm seeing here, and which I think is just kind of an important call, it is this AI ML stuff doesn't just happen. You also don't have to be the guy that thinks you know everything. There are people that can help, Microsoft being one of them, and really starting to actually consult with these people who can point you in the right direction, who can help you with these initiatives, and make sure you are ready, because it's not like oh, we're going to implement AI or we're going to implement ML. It doesn't just happen, right?
Right.
And so being around people that can allow you to do that is incredibly valuable, and definitely appreciate you breaking that down.
Yeah, no, I think one thing I do want to say, again, it's not a sales pitch, but Cameron and Michael, you're absolutely right. Microsoft is making huge investments, right, in its customers to see how we can realize your vision and bring, AI and ML, right, into the picture so that it creates efficiencies. It helps, protect your bottom line, but at the same time, how do you improve your margins, right? So like I said, I'm available for the customers, and Cameron, you can vouch for it, right? We've been together
Yep.
for some time. So yeah, any questions, queries, you have about it, about the investments Microsoft is making, do reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can definitely answer those for you.
Perfect. Well, Chandra, we want to thank you for joining us today. Absolute pleasure having Microsoft and yourself on the call to represent Microsoft. Any final thoughts from your end, Chandra, before we let you go for the day?
No, I think I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity, Cameron and Michael. I thoroughly enjoyed this session. Hopefully, the audience will find it useful. And like I said, I'm available to answer any questions, and I can definitely help realize your vision.
We appreciate
Thank
it,
you,
Chandra.
Chandra.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that was Chandra from Microsoft joining us today to talk a little bit about AI and ML, and highly recommend reaching out to them if you have any questions around how you as an organization can deploy this technology. We as a company are looking at it quite heavily. It is part of our future. It is something that we're definitely going to be adopting quite heavily. So outside of that, Michael, any final thoughts from your end?
No, just thank you for everybody who joined in and watched. We went a little bit longer today, but we felt that it was worth it since Chandra was breaking down a fairly complex topic that is in all the headlines and everybody's talking about. And so making sense of that and bringing that information and data source forward to our listeners was important. So if you stuck with us to the end, thank you. Outside of that, I think I'll let you take it away, Cam.
Awesome. Well, that's going to wrap today's session. We'll be back here next week, Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Looking forward to talking to you all then.
Thank you, everyone.